I'm excited to have you all here today for this focus, the executive job market. We actually have a really diverse group on our call today, representing a variety of industries, from education, manufacturing, biotech, accounting, retail, a plethora of industries. And we also have folks from different states. We've got folks from New Jersey, New York, Florida, Alabama, Missouri, even Puerto Rico and California. So thank you for really bringing in your time and your energy today. And I know that although we're targeting executives for this call, much of what you'll hear today will be applicable for your level in industry. And I want to encourage everyone that throughout our call today, if you've got a question, you don't want to forget about it, throw it in the chat. I will definitely keep track of that, and we'll get to it during our Q&A session at the end. So let's meet our panel of experts who are going to give us the inside and outside scoop. Cynthia Stolt, founder and CEO of Ahern. Oh, there we go. Cynthia, a good friend of mine, she's a 25-year veteran in executive search for the retail and beauty industries. She launched her firm in 2013 off the heels of a powerhouse career with major brands, including Estee Lauder, Donna Karan, and L'Oreal. And I've always been impressed with Cynthia's insights and approach. She knows how to get to the heart of hiring needs. She's a master at connecting contemporary candidates with key decision makers. So glad to have you here, Cynthia. Then we have Scott. Scott Long, he's the Director of Global Executive Search at Teradata. Scott has 25 years of experience in every aspect of search there is, from executive search and talent acquisition in the corporate realm to retained, contingency, and temporary search in the agency world. He's a recognized expert in behavioral-based interviewing. He's highly regarded as a public speaker on the local and global stage. So welcome, Scott. Next, Carla Salerno. She's the current Director of Placement Services at Symmetry Search Group, and she's a former recruiting manager at Robert Half International. Carla has over 20 years of staffing experience with a particular specialty in finance and accounting. Her knowledge in these sectors are truly fortified by her CPA license and an auditing background with Toys R Us and Coopers and Lybrand. I never hesitate to recommend Carla. She's an honest, straightforward recruiter who's equally committed to clients and candidates. And certainly last but not least, Anthony Santiago, corporate recruiter of Cross River Bank. Tony has 2 decades of recruiting experience, primarily in the fintech space. And he's worked in both executive search and corporate talent acquisition. Tony holds a senior certification with SHRM, which is the Society of Human Resource Managers, and he's recognized for contributing to the first white paper from ATAP on ageism and hiring, which is incredibly relevant in today's market. So we've got a wealth of knowledge on our call today, so let's get this party started. I'd like to start with a look at the big picture. I think it would help potential candidates to understand what companies are up against today. So, I mean, given our emergence from COVID-19 and even the recent social equality contentions, businesses, both large and small, have to be looking at the future. So Scott, I want to throw this question to you first. What should executives know about their targets? And what I mean by that is, what are some of the big decisions that businesses are facing, not only in 2020, but in planning for the long haul?
Sure. Thank you, Lisa, and welcome everyone. One of the things that I found today, companies are struggling with trying to balance the responsibilities they have to their clients, responsibilities that they have to their investors, if it's a publicly held company, as well as responsibilities to what I'll call ideologies or viewpoints in the marketplace around diversity and things like that as well. And it's a really challenging thing for companies to be able to balance. And so finding solutions to their headcount needs that best meets all of those challenges is ultimately what companies want to do. One of the sayings that I've had and that has been preached to me in the past, shall I say, is streamlining or doing more with less. My company went from 11,000 people 2 years ago to 8,300 people currently. And yet we're far more profitable than we've ever been. Our revenue is slightly down because of a change in business model, but that will be changing over this next year. But one of the things that we constantly look for is people that can not just do their jobs, but add value elsewhere. So I do run global executive search for the entire company, but I also help with our behavior-based interviewing. I also help run our predictive index testing, and I'm involved in a couple of internal projects as well for all of talent acquisition and human resources as well. So to be able to add value beyond your core center of expertise is really critical, so that the company feels that they can get as much out of their employees as possible without having to expand the headcount beyond reason. I think that's one of the real big challenges most companies are going to face, especially in light of COVID-19 and in the business economy as a whole, that we see approaching in the years ahead. I think that's going to be something that companies are really interested in. So anytime we can talk to our clients or talk to our prospective companies about not just what we do, the center of expertise, if you will, that we bring to the table, but other things that we can add to the organization to increase or improve it, is hugely important.
But I appreciate hearing that perspective. So it seems that executives have to, on the outside, have to look at the broader picture to see how they're going to assist the organization, the company, institution move forward with, to your point, lean and mean, actually. Right?
Absolutely.
Great.
Absolutely.
I appreciate that. So Cynthia, let me kick it to you now. You're on the outside looking in.
Yeah.
So can you add your perspective on what companies are facing? What are they telling you their biggest concerns are?
So I think, well, I was going to say we can divide it into two camps, but I mean, there are multiple camps that we can certainly divide the current economy in. It's like nothing we've ever seen before. And we came into it in most part with a very frothy environment. We all had a lot of head count, a lot of volume, and everything is going to be different going forward. I read an article that I think best summarizes it, and especially for those people that are looking for jobs right now. CEOs, their new role as CEO is Chief Empathy Officer, and that is for both internal and external hires. So it used to be a lot about transaction. We got a role to fill, we got a rush to fill that void. People are going to be a lot more diligent in the way they hire, a lot more thoughtful, recognizing the balance of their internal talent versus going to the outside. It's just everything, this whole, between the pandemic and, to your point, the most recent events are experiences we've never had before. And we came into it once again with this really frothy environment. And so it's making everybody pause. I've got two types of candidates right now, those that are looking to growth and moving forward. And we just picked up new business. So that's like that optimistic note I want to throw out there, and not just one, but two searches in the last week. And we got another call 2 weeks ago and another call 2 weeks before that. So there are people with growth mentality, and there are others that are really examining their internal organization. And I just ask those candidates, whether you're in process with one of those or you're most interested in one of those, you need to be patient. We're going to come through this. They're going to identify their needs. But there's going to be, I think, really, there's two, I'm saying two camps because I'm feeling the two camps. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting to kind of come from those both perspectives. So, and I'm glad to hear that there is that growth mindset, that there is some play in the market. I've had several candidates that have given me some good news in the past few weeks that have gotten offers at a senior level. So things are moving along. There are opportunities out there, but to your point, it's not the full side of the story. So being patient about those decisions that companies are making, and that they're being really thoughtful about it. Which, think about it, as an executive or any job candidate, should be just as thoughtful about the decisions you make or where you're going to, lay your hat. So, and you kind of brought up a point that's leading us really nicely into my next question, is the difference between the external and the internal candidate, like looking at the candidate pool. And we've got so many folks at a variety of levels that have been furloughed, and wondering how are companies looking at those candidates versus the external, bringing somebody new. So I want to throw this question to you, Tony, whether it be from your particular institution or what you're hearing on the street. How are furloughed executives being addressed? Are they given consideration before external candidates, either out of loyalty or practicality? What's going on in that realm?
Well, I've worked typically for organizations that thankfully considered internal employees before external employees, just in regular postings. But certainly for furloughed or laid off employees, we would typically consider those employees before external candidates. However, I think in situations like, economic downturns and large disruptions, things like that, organizations have maybe every intention of bringing back their furloughed employees. However, during right sizing, trying to maintain the business operation, things change. I think functions change. I've seen where the existing or surviving employees, as you said earlier, doing more with less. Maybe you're helping out in other departments that really weren't a part of scope of your current role, and process change. I mean, I've seen things recently where one part of the business is affected, and the organization starts and creates an entirely new product or business line. So in trying to right size the ship, again, functions change, process, systems. And so when you're looking to bring back furloughed employees, the needs or the skill sets may have changed. And therefore, again, you had every intention of bringing them back, but again, during the entire reorganization, right sizing, the skill sets change, and you may not have that in those furloughed employees. And therefore, you may look externally to find those skill sets. But typically, I've thankfully worked for organizations that would bring back those furloughed employees first.
Yeah. So part of it is certainly being loyal and considering the internal teams that have been working for you for so long or have shown and proved their value. And then at the same time, it's considering what is it that we need, really understanding the position and the need of the role and where it's going to make that decision of whether the furloughed employee is the right fit or not. So I guess it does come down to need. Well, Carla, again, you're on the agency side. So when you've got a client coming to you, do you find that they've already looked at a furloughed employee, or they're actually considering both at the same time? What do are they holding back on external candidates? Can you share your insights?
So thank you, Lisa. I feel in my role, I might not be part of that initial decision about whether they would consider a furloughed first. So I might not be privy to that as much, but when they come to me, I feel that they may be taking that opportunity to compare to the market, and kind of see what's out there in the talent pool. It's a bigger talent pool. It gives them, as a company, the opportunity to see, versus what I have here, is there somebody stronger, maybe to Tony's point, that has a different skill set or a slightly different skill set that can now fit a little bit better to what we're searching for as we grow and evolve through this. So I think that's my biggest point is, I might not know the process leading up to the call to me, but there could be, that thought process. And I actually encourage that because, there is just limits with what you have in your current employee base. And sometimes there's some other skill set out there that you weren't even aware of that we could help to source and, and things work out somehow, but that's a good opportunity to do that search. So we see that often, there could be lots of reasons for that, effort to do that. But that, I think to Tony's point, might be based on skill set and how that could change internally.
Well, and I appreciate the other point that you brought up, that as an external recruiter, you're not always privy to everything behind the scenes. So the company is going to share with you what they want to share with you. And I just for everyone on the call here, sometimes to really understand a little bit about the external recruiters, their situation, that they can come to you with an opportunity and discuss your candidacy. And then we find out, oh, they went with an internal candidate, and you think, oh, the recruiter wasted my time. It's not always the case. There are reasons for a company coming to look at what is on the outside and can it fit what we're looking for, and then they have to evaluate both sides. So don't shoot the messenger is what I'm saying here, because external recruiters absolutely have their value.
Right.
So thank you for that. And now you actually all, with that question, kind of led to, let's keep on with the assessments. So companies have historically, this is what I've heard, have historically searched for executives who are strategic planners, creative thinkers, and also adaptable and have the ability to inspire. So Tony, I want to ask you, are these still in-demand skills, or are there perhaps new criteria being set when hiring executives, considering the tough business decisions that we've just discussed?
I think those are still relevant attributes and attributes that are still considered. One of the things I've noticed through this myself is collaboration has really increased and become more critical. Again, you may be on project teams. You may, again, partner with other areas of the organization that you typically have not partnered with. You may have to come up with alternative solutions, again, as a team. Being team-oriented is also an important factor currently. But yeah, I think being adaptable, generally speaking, flexibility, being able to grow with the organization. I always look for somebody who, yes, fits the position now, but can fit the position as we need it in 6 months or in a year. So somebody who can grow with the organization, flexible, adaptable, collaborative. Those are all attributes, I think, that are relevant now and continually relevant, but even more so.
I appreciate you bringing up the collaboration, because when you hear leaders and executives, certainly they're making the big decisions and they're driving the change. It's important for the leader, even at that high level, to bring in the insights and the ideas and the challenges that their teams are facing, to value everyone in the picture. So good to know for executives that are, they say they're leaders, but we also have to be those team players. So I appreciate that perspective. So Cynthia, you can take us a little further. What are you hearing from clients that are coming to you when they're sourcing executive candidates from your end? What are the skills and attributes, maybe beyond what Tony just shared, that they're looking for today?
So I think what we are going through, not what we've gone through, we're still going through, has proven to all those that are hiring that you need people who are resilient. That is the word that, when I talk to CEOs, they talk about who on their team has done well during this, has even gotten maybe more creative during this, has even gotten more productive. And those people that just can't figure their way through working either autonomously or obviously virtually, that I think was never, I don't know that it was as recognized and as valued as it will be going forward. Another word, and these are kind of the squishy skills, so I'm not going to get into the experience, but really what makes a successful person transition into today's environment. Optimism, and I'm not talking Pollyanna optimism, but optimism is really critical. And I spend a lot of my days talking now to folks that are searching, who you can hear are just frustrated, scared, and they're wearing every emotion on their sleeves. And when the hiring managers are looking to hire, they're going to want to see resilience and optimism. And those aren't things that I think we used to screen for. I started with private equity, resilience always with private equity, but I realized that all the people that I was placing in these high risk situations were totally optimistic, really optimistic. And that made them successful, and it made them good collaborators, and it made them, so I think, for me, those would be the 2 points that I would make.
Yeah, it's funny how optimism is a quality that you think it's just kind of easy, but it's something that has to be looked for, and it just doesn't come off as a smile. So we're going to get to that part a little bit more deeper into those skills assessment a little later on. You know,
Lisa,
I know
may
you
I
have
bring
some
out a
time
point
here,
on that?
Yeah,
If you
Scott, I
mind?
was just about to come to you. Can you add some color to this?
Yeah, no, and I appreciate exactly what Cynthia said, and I'll just choose optimism as an example. Just from a practical standpoint, when you're interviewing, to be able to talk about specific examples. Saying I'm an optimistic person is kind of like saying, you know, my mom likes me. Well, that's great, you know, but it doesn't help anyone. You need to be able to talk, and this comes down to what people may have heard, behavior-based interviewing, to be able to give specific examples of times where it would be very challenging to be optimistic, but because of the personality that you have, or because of that trait that you were able to exhibit, you were able to accomplish X, Y, or Z. And that's what companies are looking for, is very practical, very fundamental results. I tell candidates all the time, most companies are looking for one of four things. How did you save company money? How did you make a company money? How did you save the company time? Or how did you increase the perception of the company in the marketplace? And when push comes to shove, to be able to describe in detail or in specifics how you accomplished one of those four goals, that's what companies are looking for. Because if you simply compare job descriptions, it's what I use on my training that I do with behavior-based interviewing. If you simply say, my job as an XYZ is to do this and this and this and this, anybody in the industry that has a similar job can say they do the same kinds of things. The question is not so much what you do, but how well do you do it? And that's where you set yourself apart, because there is a top salesperson and bottom salesperson. There's an outstanding CEO, and there's a CEO who leads their company into the tank. And so to be able to elaborate on those things, like optimism, like other character traits, giving specific examples that demonstrate that, and that is a normal, reoccurring trait within you, is incredibly valuable and candidly, I'd say, essential to help you get the job.
You know, I appreciate that added piece to Tony and Cynthia. That one word that you just mentioned, recurring. I read an article not too long back about results, and companies, when they see someone that has a really major, whether it's a revenue goal, a time savings, increase in productivity, whatever it is, if it's a large number that they've done once, it's good. But if they actually saw smaller changes over time, where there's a consistent track record of generating growth versus those big one day hits once a year. So I think, to your point, having that recurring stream of results is more.
Or if they can do it in various different positions as well, it shows security, it shows success in many different arenas. People begin to say, wow, this is a successful person who can apply it in a number of different ways.
Yeah, it's funny. There's always a back and forth between generalist and specialist. Should I be general and do it all, or should I be special in it? I guess it runs both ways. You know, Carl, I want to bring you into this picture. So
I actually unmuted. I have something to add to that. That's a great point. And I think from a candidate perspective, and some more than others, often are uncomfortable talking about those things. They have a hard time selling themselves, even if they're salespeople, because now we're talking about ourselves. So it takes a lot of practice. It takes really writing down those examples and knowing them cold and really owning them. And I don't know that enough candidates who are searching do that really well. So that takes practice. That takes, you know, standing in front of a mirror and practicing, or, you know, mock interviewing with family members or whatever it might be, but really owning it and being ready to talk about those exact things, those examples. That's critical. So the practice part, I feel, would, you know, enhance that and make them shine.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's something that, you know, we're very used to suiting up and getting dressed on the outside, but sometimes we forget to suit up the inside, and then practicing that communication and how we're going to market and sell ourselves is a key point. So now you've given our audience here some idea of the skill set and the personality traits that companies are looking for today. So I think that's a good time to pivot. But before I do, I want to encourage everyone on this call to think about your situation. So if something's coming up here that you think, hey, I got a question that really relates to my situation, throw it in the chat. I want to bring up what's going on in your mind. So I can bring it up during our cold tier at the end. So open up your minds and throw in your questions. It's open season here. All right, so now we've gone some of the criteria that we're looking for. Let's pivot on how executives can open doors with folks like you, both internal and external recruiters. They see an opportunity out there, or maybe they're exploring for opportunities. Well, I'm a big proponent of networking. Anywhere, anytime, with anyone. 70% of jobs, it's been a statistic for decades now, are found through connections. It does require some strategy and finesse. So I kind of want to go over a little bit, maybe rules of engagement for our audience so they get an understanding of what's either the most appropriate or the best way to reach out. So Scott, I want to throw it to you first. And this is a two-pronged question. In your opinion, is it appropriate for an executive who you've never met, haven't been referred to yet, is it appropriate for that executive to reach out to you cold to an internal recruiter? And if so, when and how should they do that? How should they make that connection?
Sure. Yeah, great question. I would say it's not only appropriate, it's actually desirable. And that might shock some people, but that tells me a little bit about a person too, because of the way they reach out. When a person reaches out and they write a 6-page long document about all the wonderful facts and figures and how wonderful I don't have time to read that. I had one opening, for example, that I had 864 applicants for. If I'm even remotely going to get through some of those resumes, I don't have time to be reading a resume or reading a bio of somebody that I've never spoken to. I have no idea what they do or what they're applying for. So when I say reach out, do it with the executive's mindset in yours, meaning this is a very busy person. They don't know me. They don't know why I'm reaching out. And so I want to be straight and to the point. I want to go very, very quickly to the fact that I recognize their time is valuable. So I'm showing respect to the individual. I will say this is actually how I got my last 2 jobs. I proactively cold called the companies that I'm working at, both Accenture and now currently at Teradata. I'd never spoken to them. There was no job on the website. The job was created for me in both circumstances. And it was because I reached out. You don't know me, we've not spoken before, but this is what I do. And I included literally 2 sentences. This is what I do, and this is the value I bring to the table. I'd welcome the opportunity to discuss that with you if you ever have a moment free. I appreciate your time because I realize it's valuable. And I ended it there. And in many circumstances, I had a lot of executives reach back to me and say, thanks, no needs at this time, or hey, your background sounds great. Why don't we talk in 90 days? Nothing happening right now. But they appreciated my respect of their time. They appreciated the few accomplishments that I presented to them, and it worked out well. Like I said, I got a job at Accenture, which is one of the premier consulting firms in the world, and I got a job at Teradata, where I've been over 2 years now. And these weren't lower level jobs as Director of Global Executive Search. So it works at all levels if you do it appropriately.
Well, if I can take that a step further with this part of the question, is it okay if they reach out to you when there isn't an opening? What's that sort of pre-networking that they can do, and what's some of that messaging language that they can share when they're coming out to you? Because I always tell folks the whole expression, dig your well before you get thirsty. And to network when you need, like if you just got furloughed or just got laid off, it's a little panic mode. You may not come off in the best light. You may not shine. So if they do sort of reach out earlier, what is sort of the best way they can do that?
Sure, and I would be straightforward. One of the things that, and I think probably the rest of the folks on this call would agree with me, my panelists, honesty is everything. And so when I'm talking with someone or when I'm initiating a networking call, I always start the conversation, we've never spoken before. That way they're not going, oh shoot, why should I know this person? Who are they? What, we've never spoken before. I saw your profile on LinkedIn and we had a lot of shared common connections. I think it might be worthwhile for us to chat if you ever have a moment or interest in talking to someone in executive search. Or I'm beginning to start considering what's out in the marketplace. Things are fine here, but I'm seeing some things down the road that concern me. I'd welcome the opportunity to get your opinion on the subject. Those kinds of things, asking for advice, asking for opinions, asking for thoughts, offering something in some way that can be a value to your your connection. I remember the story of the most successful insurance salesperson ever. He had over 10,000 meals in New York City at a fine dining restaurant, but he never sat alone. He always brought two people with him. And the purpose for the two people was two people that could add something to each other. You do that with 10,000 times, so that'd be 20,000 people. It was no wonder he was the most successful insurance salesperson that ever worked in that industry. So I think when you can add something to people, that's always a positive benefit. So if you're going to reach out unsolicited, make sure you're adding something to them. It gives them a reason to want to talk to you, a reason to want to dialogue with you back and forth.
I feel very validated because I've been encouraging everyone that I speak with to be forthcoming in that we've never met before. I'm looking for advice. I'm exploring. I'm thinking about, be open to a chat, and then being reciprocal. So you can share, either it's an article that you read that may be interesting to them, or an event that's coming up that maybe tap into their professional sector or what have you. It kind of shows you a resource, and it gives them that bit of a reason that you're not just always asking, but you can give too.
That's right.
So Carla, thank you so much for that. Carla, I want to come on the agency side. It really bothers me when I hear folks say, oh, recruiters are a waste of my time. I think that, there are a few bad apples out there in every industry, but job seekers really cut out a valuable source of opportunities when they don't leverage the recruiter channel. So what communication strategies would you recommend to an executive when they're cold networking with you as an external recruiter?
Well, along the same lines, I feel that if you want to do that without knowing me or knowing if I have a position that's right for you, I welcome that. I almost welcome it before you're ready to start looking for yourself, because I think you're in a better mindset then too for, really thinking about the next steps and not feeling as desperate to get a job, so to speak. Right. So, it's more of a building a relationship than it is, really drilling down to an actual position that we may or may not have. Knowing specifically kind of where we may get opportunities, and I'll share that. Like you said, initially I'm honest and forthright. I'm not going to tell a candidate that I'll ever get a job in California, because I won't. So, I'll share with them what I may get that could be applicable, but I'll also try to help them. I'll try to help them with their resume. Refer people to you all the time for more detailed support, and if I can give them just a little bit of peek into the market and what I'm seeing, and share some positive news. I feel like a lot of them need that, so I welcome that anytime, even prior to a search commences. So, I think that's important.
Great. Thank you. We actually have a question in here, so I want to throw it out to you. This is actually for you, Tony. So the question is, what advice you can give to an executive or any individual who's looking to leverage an executive position when they're on the POC background?
I'm sorry, what do you mean when they're on the POC background?
Actually, that's a good point, because I thought, so Rosa, can you unmute yourself? It's an acronym that I'm not familiar with. I'd love to learn here too.
Oh, I know what she's talking about.
Okay, so that's me. That's my bad.
Rosa, are you talking about people of color?
Yes, I am.
Thank you.
Okay, sorry. You threw me off, but I know what you're talking about. Can you just tell me the question again now?
Sure.
Leveraging, trying to, as a person of color, Rosa, trying to leverage and get into the organization, or is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay, great. So, I think, a couple of things as Scott and the others were talking about, I was going to jump in on is, one is when you're coming in unsolicited, right, trying to approach it from one, if it's an internal recruiter, that there is a specific position that you're applying for, right? You can certainly go on LinkedIn, and as Lisa mentioned, that I agree with her wholeheartedly, always be networking, right? Always be recruiting, always be networking. So certainly there are professional associations, there are different, I myself am a part of or supported various Latin organizations, being a person, right, Hispanic background. But yeah, definitely networking in different professional organizations That's one. And then two is reaching out through maybe a warm referral, or if you're going on LinkedIn and you're seeing who the hiring managers are, or again, you're connected through them, a friend of a friend via LinkedIn, getting that warm referral, just so that you can get your name on the top of the pile, right? And that's for everyone. But yeah, I think that certainly, again, taking an active role in professional associations. So one, yes, attending events, but trying to take a leadership role as well. And then just continuing to network and reach out and connect it to how you add value to the organization, particularly to a specific role that is open, hopefully, and reach out that way.
Can I make one point on that too? And Tony, wonderful points. From a practical standpoint internally, and I should probably never say this because I'm in executive search, avoid HR in some ways. And it's a fact. When I got my 2 jobs, I avoided HR. I didn't talk to them. I went right to the people that would hire me. But especially persons of color or underrepresented minorities, what I tell is go to companies and look for their chief diversity officer. Because if you get someone that's on your team, if you will, or has a vested interest in trying to expand or grow diverse organizations, you'll have someone selling you within the organization. And so to go to a diversity officer or a diversity inclusion officer or a manager responsible for diversity, whatever, and simply say, I'm looking within your organization, wasn't certain that I saw anything on the website that was a good fit, but I wanted to simply introduce myself. Someone like that who is specifically focused on these types of topics can be an incredibly valuable, I'll say peer, but advocate on your behalf. Again, I never said it as an internal recruiter, but because you should come to me if you're going to be looking for a job in my company. But truthfully, I would do that. I would look for companies with diversity officers, inclusion officers, people like that. They will be incredibly valuable assets to you.
Yeah, I think all of this also entails a big component of doing your research on the company, doing your research on the industry, staying abreast of your industry, your profession, but seeing there's plenty of information you can simply find on organizations and how they're partnering with certain nonprofit groups and that sort of thing. And then you know that they have the culture, right? Because you want to go somewhere where you're going to be successful and you're going to enjoy working. So you want to do research on the company to make sure that they are open to diversity and not just, quite frankly, playing lip service, actually being an inclusive organization. So a lot of research is important. And that's in any job search, period, right? You can always connect as you're reaching out unsolicited or even a warm referral and explain how your background, your experience relates to what is going on in the organization now, the plans that they have now. Maybe there's a new system that's coming on board. Maybe there's a new acquisition. Maybe they're going into a new product line, and how you yourself can relate and bring value to the organization. So there's always research involved.
Rosa, thank you very much for that question. This is why I love when my audience throws in questions, because now you expand the conversation that we're having and you even lend further credence to the value of networking with recruiters. And I appreciate, Scott, about don't go to HR. We know HR has its purpose. They do. As a networking piece, though, they are certainly not the decision maker. There's certain information they're not maybe privy to or able to share with the market. What networking is simply seeking advice, information, and of course connections, and reversing that and being a resource. So I hear a lot of folks that they get maybe a little timid to network when they are working, because either A, is my company going to know about it? Are they going to find out? If I have a LinkedIn profile, do they think I'm looking? And one of the things I always recommend that is, if certainly don't wait until you need the job, but really networking is just asking for advice and exploring that future. And job searching, boy, it takes time. So think about when you're looking for a house. If you know that you want to move, well, if you started tomorrow and you needed to be in a new place in 3 weeks from now, it's not going to happen. You're going to limit your options. But what do? You usually look a year out, 6 months out, at least 3 months out, so you can really explore, investigate, see what's out there, and get some conversations, referrals on the table. So don't start. It doesn't mean that because you have a conversation, your company is secretly listening to your phone calls or thinking that don't do it at work. That's a different story. You don't miss your professional life with networking, So there is a finesse in terms of when, the time of day, but network. And I'm so glad to hear that all of you are open to our audience chiming in, to coming in and speaking with you and getting some advice. So I appreciate that. And we do have another question that came up, which is really on the heels of this. And let me get where did it go? So let me get the chat here. So well, the question is, when someone you just network with are they more likely to get the job over someone who sent their resume in and had a call with? So really narrowing it down, is face-to-face the game changer? So I'm going to leave this open to, let's start with Cynthia. In your mind, is that face-to-face networking necessary, and does it give you the edge over someone who does not have an in?
So I think I'm the recruiter that your folks were talking about as being a waste of time. So, and I'll tell you the reason why. I work on a retained basis, right? So we have limited projects in front of us that we're working on. And so if people come to us wanting to spend an hour doing a FaceTime, which we often get asked for, it's not going to create value for either one of us, because in the short term, I may happen to know somebody who knows who knows. So I'm going to use, to answer this question, I'm going to use the theme that was just created, which is I now do recommend that people hop on the phone with me for 15 minutes. So maybe not face to face, but I can pull so much more out of hearing their story than I do reading the piece of paper. So given that we've had some time, our firm's had some time in the last 3 months, we've invested a lot of time in listening to people's stories. And my hopes are that maybe not today, maybe not 30 days from now, maybe not even 6 months from now, but maybe 3 years from now, I'll get a head of innovation search and I'll go, oh my gosh, that perfect person from Johnson & Johnson that I was speaking to. So I would not, that person would not stay with me on the piece of paper in the same way. So I have, although some people think it might be stingy, I have been saying, let's hop on the phone for a 15-minute intro call. It feels a little bit like speed dating, but it really does, I think, benefit both people. And so I would say the face-to-face always is going to beat out putting your resume into a digital application pool. But I don't know whether I've fully answered the question, but that's.
Well, I got a lot from that, because it's not just this piece of paper. You get to hear, it's audio. And today, yes, you can do a Zoom call, of course, but it's about hearing the story, hearing between the lines, so to speak, when they are sharing and making an actual connection. And I like that you brought up that it may not be tomorrow, it may not be 6 months, it could be a year from now. The result from a networking call, from a conversation with an internal, external recruiter isn't always immediate, but that's the internet. The internet is immediate. Life doesn't work out that way. It's a matter of now, who do you have as a connection in your pocket? Who's in your Rolodex? Yeah, I'm using the old word, that will think of you when the time comes. And that's why it's networking all the time, not every day, 24/7, but consistently. So people are remembering you. So I appreciate that, because you are gonna think of them 6 months, a year from now in that call.
Yeah, and just one point to add. The other thing that I was thinking about that I do recommend to people to do is think about the people in your career who have most impacted you, have been your mentors. It could even be a peer. It could be a direct report that you know are extraordinary networkers that might have moved on to another company that's interesting to you. So people often overlook the people that have been most powerful in helping shape their career as they're looking for their next. And actually that would be the first line of defense that I'd reach out to, or line up of offense that I'd reach out to if I were looking for a job. And those people will show up and certainly give you the time of day to have a cup of coffee, or virtually or in person.
Great. Well, thank you all for that. I want to now consider that we're talking about networking and all these conversations you're getting us ideas for, getting the conversation flowing. Well, considering that we're doing a lot of networking on LinkedIn, let's delve into self-marketing. So Scott, we'll start with you. Where did I go? Sorry, I meant to move that around. So Scott, as an internal recruiter, when does LinkedIn come into play when evaluating potential executive candidates, and what specifically are you looking for in a LinkedIn profile?
So I will say I have used LinkedIn for years. LinkedIn has almost 500 million users worldwide. I am user 524,000. So I'm literally the first one. There it is. All right. I literally heard about them early on, thought it was a brilliant idea, and had a feeling that this was going to grow. Had no idea it would grow as big as it did, but I knew it would get bigger. So I've been using it from the beginning. I will say I personally completed 42 searches last year in an executive search capacity within my company. And of the 42, I would say a good 3/4 of them came directly through sourcing on LinkedIn. So to have an updated profile is critical. To have it updated with the right things is critical. I refer back to my comments about successes and how I made company money, saved the company money, saved the company time, and increased the perception of the marketplace. To be able to expressly state those kinds of things in a succinct way. Make sure you have no spelling errors. I'll never forget an executive. I must say, I did actually place him, and he did very successful at his job. He grew a company from 3 million to 125 million in 2 years. He was phenomenal. But I won't use his name, but he spelled his name at the top, and the very first line under his name was a detail-oriented business executive. And he spelled the word detail wrong, and he spelled his name wrong. It's an honest to God true story. So make sure, now my mother was an English teacher. I've dated English majors back in college, so it's somewhat of a thing for me, but it's not hard to see you spelled the very first words on your resume wrong, including your name. It's not a good thing. So make sure spelling's correct. Make sure punctuation is accurate. Make sure it's logically proceeding. Make sure it tells a good story. And I'd encourage you, if you haven't done so, feel free to look at my LinkedIn profile. I'm sure the rest of the folks, the panelists, would say the same thing. You'll see what I'm talking about. All of the things that I say, there's a quick description of who I am and what I do, and then it gives my successes and tells about what I've done and why there's value for you to be speaking with me if you ever wanted to do so. I'd really focus on that, because LinkedIn is an absolutely crucial business tool in the marketplace today.
Thanks for that, Scott. It is, and it's our public profile. Even if you have it private, it is out there. So I suggest everyone on the call to really take some time for work on your brand. It is visible for everyone to see. So don't just glance over it. It should be relevant. It should be compelling. It also should be interesting. And we actually have one question specifically to your typo point, Scott. What made you overlook the typo?
I don't know that I can answer that. I honestly don't know why. I think I was so, actually, you know what? And we're going back a little ways, forgive me. I do actually remember my initial call with that individual. And I called it jokingly, gratefully, but I reached out to him and I say, by the way, are you aware that on your resume, you spelled the word detail wrong when you claim to be a detail-oriented executive? So I was actually literally trying to help him, to let him know, dude, you have a spelling error and it doesn't look really good on your resume. I don't remember how he responded, but he said something to the effect of, yeah, I had to get it out because my child was going wherever, blah, blah, blah. I spelled my name wrong as well. And I'm like, oh my God, you know? And so just the way he wrote was very personable, very connecting. And it turns out he was a very personable individual, and he ended up being very successful at what he did. So I think it just kind of worked out. But there have been times where I've looked at resumes and I've been like, you know what, if you can't even spell check your resume, I'm not interested in talking to you. Yeah. So I would say that was the exception to the rule, but it did actually work out well in his behalf and in my behalf, because I made the placement and he did very well.
Well, thanks for that. So I know I have one really important question I want to get to, but before we do, the other piece of this puzzle in self-marketing is the resume. So I hear a lot of folks say, oh, resumes are going away. Not anytime soon, folks. The average hit today is over 350 resumes received per posting. That is a lot of volume for candidates, including executives, to get lost in. So Tony, briefly, can you share when you're reviewing a resume, either directly or through your applicant tracking system, what is going to make an executive stand out from a content or a design perspective?
Well, kind of as we were speaking, overlaps some of the stuff we've been talking about already is accomplishments, right? So it should be, yes, not just a laundry list of tasks and responsibilities, but of course you're going to have your responsibilities. What did that result in, right? So led X or led a team of X that resulted in, as Scott was talking about earlier, saving, cost effectiveness or increasing revenue or entering a new market. What is the accomplishment that you want to list that on your resume for sure? The very first thing, just visually, is try not to make it too busy. Sometimes I open up a resume and it's like just a lot of skills, a lot of certifications, and it needs to be visually, simple to read, easy to read. So not too busy. And yeah, I'm a please don't have typos on your resume. As we're professionals, so no typos, please. But yeah, the big thing is accomplishments. It's just not a list of your tasks and what you do, but how you made a difference and how you can relate that again, if you're targeting it to a specific role at the time, you want to convey and relate those accomplishments to what's going on in the organization or that specific role. That's what I would say, some of the tips on resumes I would give.
Excellent, thank you. And we have about 6 minutes left. I just want to add on to your thought about the accomplishments. A lot of times candidates at every level, they're not really sure what the accomplishment is. How do I quantify what I've achieved or what I've contributed? If you're not quite sure what the metric is, it helps to sort of talk to other folks in your team, other departments, and even the company as a whole, because everything that we do has some sort of action and consequence. So it could be numerical, it could be simply using the word increase or improve. But if you're not quite sure what contributions you're making in order to define on a resume, talk to folks that are in your department, talk to your clients that you've worked with or your customers, and glean from them what was the outcome of what our work together, our engagement, so that you can bring some of that story into the resume. And I'll get to that one question that we have in a moment in the chat, but I want to sort of just move now really to this final phase, the final two questions here, because we've come in full circle. We looked at the big picture about what decisions companies are looking at, kind of discussed some hiring criteria, uncovered a few savvy networking and self-marketing strategies. All these efforts are going to eventually lead to interviews. So I'd like to know is what changes are coming in the process? I mean, there's virtual and there's pre-recorded video interviews, very popular for obvious reasons, including cost and time savings. But are in-person meetings still in play? So Tony, let's start with you for real quick here. Are there any changes within the interview process that executives should be aware of, particularly in those first few meetings?
Well, certainly today, everything is virtual. If you're not used to Zoom or Skype, you are or should be very familiar with that now. As we transition phase back to the office, there may be the final round of interviews. Say if you're meeting with that division head, that may be an in-person interview at some point. Right now, it's all virtual. And so that's one hiring managers had to get used to that, as well as executives and candidates. But as we transition to the office, perhaps final rounds of interviews may be something that will be in person. It's probably going to be case by case to your organization. But certainly be familiar, practice Zoom, practice Skype, etc. Everything where you're sitting, try not to have distractions, lighting, all of that. Practice.
Yeah, a lot of the prep work is going to come into play. As much as things are changing, some of those traditional fundamental techniques of interviewing are still in play. So it's good to know that even from the video standpoint. So I
Right,
know
and
that.
just let me add in real quick on that technological standpoint. Yeah, there are times when you're preparing for that interview, and it takes multiple times, and you can just really see that as it relates to the position, the candidate really is not technologically savvy. They're just having trouble even opening up the Zoom, and that can give a perception to the hiring manager.
Got it. Now, I know we only got a couple minutes left, so I'm going to sort of split this question into two. So, Scott, in the interview process, all of you have mentioned the skills that we're looking for: optimism, being practical, collaboration, being resilient. Even Tony, you're saying being able to handle the role a few years from now. So, Scott, how are you, if you could quickly in about 40 seconds, how are you as an executive recruiter assessing through the interview process whether these candidates have those skills in demand?
Sure. There's fundamental skills, and then there's others. Fundamental skills: have they programmed? Have they led teams of X amount of size? Have they had this kind of P&L responsibility? Have they? And I'm assuming most of that, if they've done the accomplishments and things like that, will be on the resume. So I'll know ahead of time, are they generally an outlook or a fit? There's a huge number of things I could say to that question that you've asked, but I'll summarize with this. I'm a human being. I spend a whole lot of time at my job, and the last thing I want to do is work with people I can't stand and don't have a good relationship with and can't see myself spending more time with. So when push comes to shove, one of the things that I'm looking at when I'm talking to an individual is, could I see myself working with this person for a day, much less for a week, a month, or a number of years, because I don't plan on going anywhere anytime soon. And so really working on the personal connection, really working on the relational connection. It's amazing how much a person is willing to forgive on the functional side when they really like the person, really are invested in wanting that person to work with you. So focusing on that personal connection is a huge portion of your interview process.
I've heard that a lot because skills can be learned. The personality is a harder thing to shift.
Correct.
So it's really about
Correct.
that connection. So just now sliding into this last question, Carla, I know, again, you're on the outside, but you're certainly privy to this. You're often the first line of defense to speak for candidates. So how do you sort of advise them at the negotiation table? What's changing there?
Did you ask me that question, Lisa?
Yes, Carla. Yep.
Okay. So, well, at that point, I feel, there's a connection, right? So to Scott's point, if they can't do the job and they aren't a fit, there's really no negotiation. But, if we have some aspect of each of those and, more strongly on the fit side, because, culturally they have to fit in with the rest of the team, that the negotiation works. I'll give an example. It's true to life today. Filled a job today with a permanent position with a candidate who has so much more to offer than they even anticipated for the job. So they came up $28,000 on the salary. So, it was a significant jump, 25% higher than they anticipated paying, or initially came out telling you that they would pay for this position, because they're getting so much more out of it. Her personality, her skill set, everything fits so nicely. So, there's wiggle room when there is, more to gain, I guess I would say. And so just stay connected the whole time, really play it through. In each case, at the end, you could always say no, but you'll never get a second opportunity to say yes if you don't really play it through. So, I try to guide and assist and, again, be very open with both sides the entire time, because you just never know. And if we have to move forward from that, we do. But, oftentimes it does work out.
Well, I appreciate you all giving sort of that human side of the perspective. And and we're coming on a close here, and everyone's got to get back to their world. I want to really say you have given us a lot to think about. As we wrap up, I want to thank Cynthia, Scott, Tony, Carla for giving us the inside-outside scoop. This has been an eye-opener for me. I hope all of you found this worthy of your time. I will make this recording and other resources available next week. So any of these that have to hop off or other stuff that we didn't get to, I'll give in some tip sheets along with the video next week. And from here, I hope you keep an eye out for future webinars, keep in touch. In fact, if you have any questions about what you heard today, about your career or your resume, reach out to me by phone, by email, on LinkedIn. I'm here. So because when we work together, everyone's mission is possible. I'll see you all soon. Thank you very much for joining.